Ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for checking out mtgrocks.com. My name's Alan. Today we have some more Kamigawa Neon Dynasty previews from over the weekend. There were a handful of cards released and previewed over the weekend, so we're going to go ahead and jump into all of them and take a look. There's some pretty cool ones here. So let's start off with the white cards. First off, we have March of Otherworldly Light. So X and a white. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you may exile any number of white cards from your hand. The spell costs 2 less for each one exiled this way, and then you exile target artifact, creature, or enchantment with mana value X or less. This is an incredibly strong card. First and foremost, the exile clause does not state non-land. So particularly, and I believe Seamus wrote about this in his article over on the website, that this can hit Urza Saga in Modern, which is pretty powerful. 1 white mana just deals with the land entirely and just exiles it in its entirety, which is pretty sweet. Additionally, I mean, this can, this can hit other things in other formats, and having the, the additional cost reduction by exiling cards from your hand. We've seen that be very powerful with other cards like the Modern Horizons 2 Elementals. For maybe a little bit different reasons, but generally speaking, cost reductions at very low resource cost is pretty nice, right? So we have a couple of versions of it here. Next up, we have Hotshot Mechanics. So for 1 white, we have a 2/1, and it can crew vehicles as though it were 2 power greater, which is kind of insane. So basically, this 1 mana creature can crew a 4 vehicle. That's incredibly strong, truthfully. For 1, it's a really great commander card. I know that there are some red-white commanders that deal with vehicles, so this could be really great for that. But additionally, we are seeing a good number of vehicles make their way in Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. We've seen vehicles come up across various sets in the last year or so, year and a half. So just another really great staple card to really power up those vehicle decks. Next up, so we saw AO already, but this is just the extended art version. We've seen Imperial Subduer before, but this is just the Samurai Frame Showcase version. Next up for the new stuff, though, we have Lion Sash, which is another one of these reconfigure equipment creatures. So for 1 and a white, it's a 1/1, and then it has white, exile target card from graveyard. If it was a permanent, you put a +1/+1 counter on Lion Sash, and then equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each +1/+1 counter on Lion Sash, which is incredibly powerful. Basically like a Scavenging Ooze in white, but it can basically beef up another creature that we have. This is a great card for decks like Death and Taxes, where they may be struggling to have some targeted spot removal in the main deck. This might be one of those cards that could be good enough to see play as maybe a 1 or 2 of in those decks. But overall, a great piece of graveyard hate for white. And then also can just become another, big creature on the board when you need it to. You also have the extended art version as well as the soft glow frame treatment here, which is pretty nice. Next up, we have Banishing Slash for 2 white. Sorcery, destroy up to 1 target artifact, enchantment, or tapped creature. Then if you control an artifact and an enchantment, then you can create a 2/2 white samurai creature token with vigilance. I have a feeling that this is going to be a theme, a very commonly pushed theme across, across the set of having an artifact and an enchantment. I think we've seen a couple of cards already that have that, or if not, they're coming up here soon. But they want us to have enchantments and artifacts in play. This makes it a bit easier considering that some of these creatures are enchantment creatures as well, so that does help. And then also, I think they want us to be, playing with these reconfigure creatures. So definitely going to be a really good card for limited, definitely. And then I'm sure that there will be some decks that would want this in constructed. Again, probably something like maybe a Death and Taxes type of deck would maybe want this, where we're playing, things like Stoneforge Mystic, and maybe we also have some kind of enchantments like Rest in Peace or something of that nature to go along with it, and then we just get to make a samurai. So pretty cool there. And then lastly, Sunblade Samurai. So 4 and a white. It's a vigilance 4/4 with channel 2. And when you discard it, you can search your library for basic planes, reveal it, put it in your hand, then you gain 2 life. Pretty nice card. I think mostly for limited. You know, in order to activate the channel ability, you need to have this in play already, I believe. I don't know. We'll have to just see, or maybe not. I don't know. Maybe, I mean, 2 mana, I guess, go get a planes is pretty good, right? If this is something that can be activated in the hand, I'm not 100% certain on how, if you need the permanent in play already to activate channel, or if you can just activate it from the hand. Because if you can just activate it from the hand, this card's pretty good. And potentially has some constructed application, possibly in the Samurai decks, if there's going to be Samurai decks that exist. But definitely a good limited card, for sure. Next up, we're going to move on to Futurist Agent in blue. We're going to scroll down a little bit here because there is a good number here. So Futurist Agent, so we have a couple of versions. So here's the regular and then the Ninja Showcase frame. And Futurist Agent is, as long as it's tapped, it's a human citizen with base power 1/1 and can't be blocked. And then you can pay 2 and a blue to untap it. So that's actually kind of sweet. So basically, when you go to attack with it, it can't get blocked because it turns into a 1/1. But then you can pay the mana to untap it after blockers. So you get in for full damage, which is really nice. Additionally, if you are comboing this with, say, like Satoru Umezawa, you ninjutsu this in, and it's a 1/1, and then you pay 3 mana, untap it, and then you're hitting for 3. But typically, this is going to be a ninjutsu enabler. Still a very cool card. It has the upside of not of still being a reasonable threat and being untapped after it attacks, but then making it so that it can be unblocked basically as it gets in. So pretty cool card. Very, very nice card for those the ninja decks. Next up, Moonsnare Prototype. So an artifact that's cost 1 blue. Tap it, and then tap an untapped artifact or creature you control to add a colorless mana to your mana pool, and then it's channel for 4 and a blue. You discard it, and the owner of target non-land permanent puts it on top or bottom of their library. And we have seen that kind of effect be pretty strong as well too. Cards like Aether Gust, particularly targeting red and green permanents, be a staple in these kinds of decks. Just really being able to put cards back that are in play, put them back into the library, is generally a great thing. And then you can combo and follow that up with something like Field of Ruin and make your opponent shuffle their library. So the card that you didn't want to deal with is back in the deck somewhere, and most likely you're not going to see it for the rest of the game. Next up, we have kind of the extended versions of Jin-Gitaxias, Kairi, and the Reality Chip. Nothing new there. Same with Thousand Face Shadow. We have the extended and the Ninja Frame Showcase versions of the cards. Next up, for new cards, Armguard Familiar. Again, another equipment beast, reconfigure card. So it looks like it's like a little owl guy there. 1 and a blue for 2/1 with Ward 2, and then equipped creature gets +2/+1 and has Ward 2. Pretty good card. Reconfigure a 4, which is pretty expensive. But I think this is a good limited protection spell. If it maybe gave flying or something, that would be even better, but decent card for limited. And then next up in blue, we have Awakened Awareness. So X and double blue for an aura, an enchantment aura. So it enchants an artifact or a creature. When it enters the battlefield, you put X +1/+1 counters on it, or on the enchanted permanent. And then as long as the permanent is a creature, it has base power of 1/1. Now this can be kind of essentially almost like a removal spell if you were. You put this on a big creature that your opponent has, and you don't put any mana into it. You just pay 2 blue, put it on your opponent's creature, and then it becomes a 1/1, and now you can profitably attack through. They can't really block you if they don't want to lose their creature. Or additionally, you can slap this on maybe, say, an Ornithopter and make it huge, and then it has base power 1/1. And then you just dump a bunch of +1/+1 counters on this flying threat, and now you get in for free damage. So pretty interesting card. Can have, has multifaceted, can be used in a couple of different ways. So that's a pretty nice thing. But I think this is definitely going to be limited playable. Next up, this card's insane. Moon Circuit Hacker. So 1 and a blue for 2/1, and it has ninjutsu of 1 blue, which is really cheap. And then whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. And then if you do, discard a card. So kind of you get to loot, unless it entered the battlefield this turn. So if you get to ninjutsu it in, you get to just draw a card. That seems really, really good. And then you have the ninja frame as well as the regular version. And then lastly, in blue, Guardians of Aboro, 2 and a blue for 3/4 defender. Modified creatures you control can attack as though they didn't have defender. So as soon as you start to weaponize up this creature, you get an equipment on it, you enchant it with something, you get a +1/+1 counter on it. It can start attacking, and potentially this could be another great option for the wall tribal decks, right? I know they're not competitive or anything like that, but we have seen in the past support for wall tribal with things like Assault Formation and Arcades, I believe the dragon for commander purposes. Make some fringe splash. So this would be another one of those instances where this is a great supporting card for that, and you can figure out ways to very widespread put counters on things to modify those creatures. So very, very cool. Next up for black, let's see here. Okay, black we have here. So starting with this one, Malicious Malfunction, and Malicious Malfunction is 1 and 2 black, and it's all creatures get -2/-2 until the end of turn. And if a creature would die this way, or died this turn, you get to exile it instead. So kind of like a Cry of the Carnarium sort of replacement. Pretty good card. We've seen Cry of the Carnarium see play in the past, so this is just another kind of good replacement for that in standard. Next up, we have Assassin's Ink. So this spell costs 1 less to cast if you control an artifact. It also costs 1 less if you control an enchantment. So again, playing on that, having an artifact and an enchantment in play, getting some benefit. And this is just destroy a target creature or planeswalker. So at its best, it could be 2 black, destroy a creature or a planeswalker. Unconditional, very cool. Next up, we have a combo here. This is Nizumi Prowler. We've seen Nizumi Prowler before. We've seen this version, the Ninja Frame, show up in the past in English. So Nizumi Prowler, 1 and a black for 3/1 with Ninjutsu, 1 and a black. And then when it enters the battlefield, target creature you control gains death, touch, and lifelink until the end of turn. Generally, I would say a pretty good card for the Ninjutsu decks. I mean, it's you slap this, you Ninjutsu this in, and a creature that your opponent did decide to block gets that one that gets death, touch, and lifelink. And if it's like a really big creature, well, great, you get to for sure kill the thing that's blocking it. You also gain a bunch of life. If it's got trample, you get to trample over for a bunch of damage as well too. So great card, very good card for the Ninja decks. Next up, we have Leech Gauntlet. So another reconfigure card, 1 and a black for a 2/2 with lifelink. And the quick creature is lifelink and with the reconfigure of 4. Pretty much a limited card. Again, these reconfigure costs are going to be something that we'll have to kind of keep an eye on in the future as the new standard format develops. But I have a feeling that a reconfigure cost of anything more than really like 2 is going to be pretty much strictly set off for limited and have really no constructed viability. 3 is possibly workable if the card is insane, if the effect on the card is really, really good. So we'll have to see, but an interesting limited card just to give something lifelink. Next up, we have another of our Dragon Spirit cycles. So we have Junji the Midnight Sky, 3 and 2 black for 5/5 with Flying and Menace. When Junji the Midnight Sky dies, choose one of the following. Each opponent discards 2 cards and loses 2 life. Or you get to put target non-dragon card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under control, and you lose 2 life. And we've seen this card show up. I think I wrote an article on this one. I think last week or 2 weeks ago, something of that nature. This card is nuts, absolutely insane. Great in Commander for decks like Marin or Teysa Karlov, just really cards that care about it dying. And then with things like Marin, for example, or Carador, you can very easily just reanimate this and continue to get tons of value with this creature over and over and over again. So Junji, awesome. As far as constructed goes, I think it's still also pretty good too. Throwing this, the fact that for one that it can reanimate any creature from any graveyard, or any non-dragon creature, I should say, from any graveyard, is really good. So I could see this being a player in, say, like a for one, a reanimator strategy, but also could be a good like control kind of mid-rangey control deck type of creature where you have the option to make your opponent discard some cards and putting them down on card advantage. So that's generally pretty good, but it's also just a great beat stick, right? 5 mana, 5/5 with flying and menace. It's evasive as heck and can get in there for some good damage. And then when your opponent eventually deals with it, they lose out on some value. So good, really, really good card. Last up in black, we have Invoke Despair. So 1 and quadruple black. We saw this already. This is the extended version of Invoke Despair. So very cool there. Next up, let's move over to red. With red, we have a couple of cards here. So starting off, Sokinzan Smelter, 1 and a red for 2/2. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you can pay 1, sacrifice an artifact, and then make a 3/1 construct with haste. The only way that I could see this being really, really good is if you could find a way to continually and perpetually generate tokens, right? Generating clues or treasure tokens. And then you just trade those into 3/1s. You could go possibly... No, that wouldn't even work either. There are ways that you could probably make this work. But most likely it's just going to be a limited card. Maybe mono red aggro finds a way to tool around this and make it work, but more than likely limited only. Next up, Bronze Plate Boar, so another reconfigure creature. 3 mana for a 3/2, trample, and then it gives +3/+2 and trample to the creature it's equipped to. Reconfigure a 5, again, like I said, high reconfigure cost, most likely not going to make the cut in constructed unless the effect is insanely good. This is, again, a pretty average card. It's an uncommon, so I don't expect it to have too big of an impact or be too big, on the board state, right? So it's, the reconfigure of 5 makes sense, and it's probably just going to be for limited. Next up here, this one on the far right, we have March of Reckless Joy. So we've seen the March of Otherworldly Joy be on there in white. So this one is X and a red, and it's an instant. As an additional cost to cast the spell, you can exile any number of red cards from your hand, and then this spell costs 2 less to cast for each red card exiled, or each card exiled this way, and then you exile the top X cards of your library. Until the end of turn, you may play those cards, or is it up to 2 of those cards? Okay, so you kind of are limited in scope. So, very interesting card here. Really good for like the mono red aggro style decks where you kind of maybe are, you've run yourself out of gas. You have maybe 4, 5, 6 lands in play, and you just need to find more fuel. You draw this. Hey, great! I'm gonna cast this spell. I'm gonna dump all, some of my mana into it. Maybe dump 2 mana or 3 mana into it. And now you have some excess mana to be able to cast some of these spells, which is, that generally you're going to be having some cheaper spells anyways if you're playing in an aggro deck. So this should be a really cool way to just give the aggro decks a little bit more fuel. Next up, we have Uprising Outlaw, or Upriser Outlaw. So it's a Samurai, 2 mana for a 1/3, gets +2/+0 for each other modified creature you control. Really good for the limited space, I would say. I think the modified theme and the mechanic is really going to be something that's more of you happen to have some modifications, or you're playing other cards that are just generally pumping your creatures up in some capacity, and the modified portion of the deck is just going to be coincidental, or you're going to gain some benefit, but you're not going to build a full-blown modified. You're not going to be really building around it and playing cards like this. I think this is really just filler for limited. Next up, Gorogoro. We have the extended version of Gorogoro. We saw that. Very cool card. We also have the extended version of Scrap Welder. Also a really cool card as well. Next up, Lizard Blades. Another equipment reconfigure creature card. So 1 in a red for a 1/1. And then double strike. So a quick creature gets double strike. But it has a reconfigure cost of 2. So I think that this is one of the ones that makes it a bit more potentially, could potentially make the cut. You slap this on like a trampling creature, and now you have effectively a built-in Embercleave, right? Pretty interesting card. I think this one definitely has the potential. We have seen, Embercleave was really, kind of a format-defining card, and this potentially could almost get there. It's searchable up with Stoneforge Mystic or any other way to search in equipment, which is cool. It doesn't have flash, which is kind of the big bummer, and it doesn't auto-equip to anything, which is also a bummer. But Yeah, it's possible. There could be some like samurai deck that cares about playing these in some fashion, right? Next up, Twin Shot Sniper, 3 in a red, 2/3 with reach. When it enters the battlefield, does 2 damage to any target, and it has channel. You can discard it to deal 2 damage to any target. I think that this is a card that's very, it's kind of odd, right? It's kind of fits in this like mid-range slot, but it feels like an aggressive creature card, like an aggro deck sort of card. I don't think this is a card that fits in the top end of any like mono red aggro decks. I don't know, but maybe the format changes and shifts to where this makes sense. But I think the channel mechanic is pretty good. It's possible this is you play these just as really as just like spells. And you don't really care too much about like the body or casting it as a creature. I don't know. It's very, very odd, interesting spot. Definitely good and limited, but as far as it's constructed, the home for this is unclear. Next up, we have Invoke Calamity. So we now have the red Invoke card. So 1 and quadruple red for an instant. You may cast up to 2 instant or sorcery spells with total mana value 6 or less from your graveyard and or hand without paying their mana cost. And if those spells will be put in your graveyard, you exile them instead, and you exile Invoke Calamity after the fact. Pretty interesting card. Most likely, I mean, this is equivalent to something like Ironcrag Feat, right? Where you basically just you're probably not. You have to combine the total mana of the 2 spells. You're up to what 2 spells you're casting, right? Can only be 6 or greater. So really, like, there is some limited variance of like what spells you really would want to be casting. Most likely, you're probably just casting 1 big 6 mana spell, right? You get it a turn earlier, or potentially if you are running with mana rocks or something, you get this just a little bit earlier. Also lets you rebuy your big spells from the graveyard, I guess, which is pretty nice. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I'm sure that there's going to be some world where there's a combo where like this breaks some kind of combo deck, right? Maybe this lets you get, lets you get rituals going or something like that to storm off or something of that sort, right? Yeah, I'm not entirely sure where this fits, but it's a powerful card. Just don't know where exactly it fits. It feels pretty combo deck centric. Next up, last up for red here, 1 in a red for Tempered in Solitude. So it's an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control attacks alone, exile top card of your library, and you may play it this turn. So there is a theme of creatures attacking alone, and particularly with Samurai specifically attacking alone. This one is just for any creature attacking alone. This is also another really interesting way for red decks to maybe like a big red deck kind of thing, where maybe you're not playing quite as many wide boards, but you're playing maybe a taller board or a bigger threat onto the board, and then it attacks alone, and maybe you get to play the card off the top. I don't know, probably a limited only card. In very fringe decks and constructed may have some application here. Cool. Next up here we have green. So some cool cards coming in for green. First up we have Kodama of the West Tree. So 2 and a green for 3/3 with reach. Modified creatures you control have trample, which is pretty nice. Plays well again with that lizards, the lizard blades, giving the creature its equipped trample and double strike. Pretty nice. And then whenever a modified creature you control deals combat damage to a player, search your library for a basic land and put it onto the battlefield, tapped, and then shuffle. And Kodama of the West Tree is an interesting card here because it actually really does play well with the larger configure costs. Being able to beef up and play more of those, reconfigure cards, giving creatures the modified trait by having them be equipped with those, with those reconfigure equipment creatures. Also, if you just slap some +1/+1 counters on and creatures you control across the board, well, hey, now you have trample on everything, which is pretty crazily good. The fact that it also has reach is nice added benefit, and then also the ramp, again, really just added benefit, allowing you potentially to play more of those reconfigured creatures. But most likely, yeah, this is a really sweet card though. Really, really cool. Next up, we have Kappa Wrecker. So we have our first Ninja Turtle. So 1 and a green for a 1/3 with ninjutsu, 1 and a green. Kappa Wrecker enters the battlefield with a death touch counter on it, so it enters modified. Whenever it deals combat damage to the player, you may remove the death touch counter from it. And when you do, exile target artifact or enchantment that player controls. So kind of an interesting, almost like Reclamation Sage style type of card. Comes in at instant speed for 1 and a green. It also has death touch, which is kind of nice. If you don't ninjutsu it in, if you just play it and then attack with it, maybe it de-incentivizes your opponent to block it, right? So very cool. And we have both the ninja frame and the regular version. Next up, Geothermal Commie, so 3 and a green for a 4/3. When it enters the battlefield, you may turn an enchantment you control to its owner's hand, and if you do, you gain 3 life. Limited card. There are again a bunch of enchantments here. If it had flash or something like that, that would probably be better to save something in combat. But again, just a pretty bog standard run of the mill limited card. So then we have the extended versions of the Kodama the West Tree, and then the extended and showcase of the Kirin Touch Orochi and teachings of the Kirin, which we saw earlier. Same thing here with the Dragon Kami's Egg for the Dragon Kami Reborn. And then last up here, the last 2 cards, Bamboo Grove Archer, Defender and Reach, so 2 mana 3/3, great, right? Defender and Reach and has Channel to destroy target creature with flying. Limited card, pretty exclusively. But it is a decent rate for what it is. And lastly, Historian's Wisdom, 2 and a green for an aura enchant artifact or creature. And then when it enters the battlefield, if he enchanted permanent is a creature with the greatest power among creatures on the battlefield, you get to draw a card. And then as long as the enchanted permanent is a creature, you get +2/+1. So very, very interesting card. Again, mostly good for limited, mostly to help you just draw some cards. You have a big dumb creature in play that you drafted. You slap this on there. Now it's bigger and you draw a card. Pretty good card. In the colorless slot, so we already saw the Surge Hacker Mech. That's pretty much we've seen from before. Nimble Hoverbike. So this is a new one here. Nimble Hoverbike Set is a 2/2. There we go. So it's a 2 mana 2/2 with flash and flying. When it enters the battlefield, tap up to 1 target creature, and then has a crew of 1. So, kind of average card. Good for limited. Does what you want to really do in limited is kind of stall out board states. It has flying and flash, which is nice, right? So that's kind of cool. Next up here we have Runaway Trashbots, so 3 mana 0/4 with trample. Gets +1/+0 for each artifact and enchantment in your graveyard. So kind of the comes down in the late game, possibly is like a big threat if you're playing a lot of it, equipments and enchantments, artifacts and enchantments. Kind of interesting, mostly for limited. And then lastly, Circuit Mender, 3 mana 2/3. When it enters the battlefield, gain 2 life, and when it leaves the battlefield, draw a card. Actually, kind of a really good card. Really good for like the blink decks. We've seen, this would be kind of almost akin to like Filigree Familiar. You throw it into a blink strategy, or it's obviously really good in something like limited. It's a good kind of average. Like you wouldn't be mad to fill your deck with a bunch of these. I mean, it isn't uncommon, so it'll be a little bit harder to find. But you picking up multiples of these in limited is great. Also, again, like I said earlier, it has some pretty decent applications for blink decks. So you can, enter the battlefield, gain 2 life, blink it. It leaves you draw a card. It doesn't have to die. It can get exiled or bounced to the hand, or like we said, blinked. You draw a card. Then it enters again, draw 2 card or gain 2 life, and then you repeat the process over and over as long as you can blink it. Pretty good card. Last up of the new cards that we have here is the multicolored cards. So first off, we have this card here in Korean. This is a Gloom Shrieker. The Gloom Shrieker, 3 mana 2/1. It's a cat beast. It's got menace. And then when it enters the battlefield, return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. And then if it would die, you exile it instead. Again, just a regrowth. Good for limited. That's really about it. Unless there's some other kind of enchantment synergies that you're playing that you may want to have like a rebuy or a regrowth on. Otherwise it's pretty much limited fodder. Next up, very cool card, Tatsunori Toad Rider. So 2 and a black for 3/3. When you cast an enchantment spell, if you don't control a creature named Kaimi, I have no idea how to pronounce that. Create Kaimi, 3/3 legendary. black and green frog creature token with whenever you cast an enchantment spell, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. And then it has 1 and a green-blue hybrid. Tatsunori Toad Rider, and target frog you control cannot be blocked this turn except by creatures with flying or reach. Very cool card, and this is one of the new ones we wrote an article about briefly. This is a brand new kind of focus for Commander and for Magic. A Sultai enchantments kind of matters card. It's something where there is definitely more applications for the card outside of Standard than there probably is inside of Standard. So really, I think this is a Commander-focused, Commander-centric card. Very, very cool. Definitely go check the article out for kind of some more of our thoughts on this one. But very, very neat to see this card be real. Art on this one, on the Ninja Showcase frame, probably my favorite of the three. Really, really vibrant and colorful, but very, very cool card. Then we have the extended version of Kyodai. Nothing new there. Same thing, extended version of Satoru Umezawa. Next up, on the new stuff, Asari Captain. So 3 red, white for 4/3 with haste. Whenever Samurai or Warrior you control attacks alone, gets +1/+0 until the end of turn for each Samurai or Warrior you control. So almost kind of like a pseudo exalted type of feel. Kind of your average. This is a good card for limited. Again, it's your average mana cost combined with a hasty threat. If you're playing Samurai, expect Samurai to be kind of a very much a solid draftable tribe in limited for Neon Dynasty. So look to pick this one up. This one's pretty good. Next up, Naomi Pillar of Order. 3 white black for 4/4. Whenever Naomi Pillar of Order enters the battlefield or attacks, if you control an artifact and an enchantment, you create a 2/2 white samurai with vigilance. Again, pretty interesting card. Pretty great limited fodder card. I don't think this is something you really can reasonably build around as far as standard 60 card constructed goes, but it's a pretty cool commander. You probably could leverage. There's tons of artifacts in Commander that you would already have, things like Soul Ringer, Mana Rocks, anyways, so that's pretty easy to meet. And then you can just play a black-white kind of enchantments matter sort of strategy, and then you make a bunch of tokens. And there are tons of enchantments that play into the token theme. Things like Anointed Procession makes a ton of sense to play. So this is a really cool one to work with, in Commander. So definitely look for that one. Next up, Prodigy's Prototype 1 white blue for 3/4 vehicle. Brand new, multicolor vehicle here. Whenever one or more vehicles you control attack, create a 1/1 colorless pilot creature token with this creature cruise vehicles as though it were power 2 greater, and it cruise for 2. This is actually pretty crazy for the vehicle decks again, and more vehicle support coming in, just giving you more of those Fox pilots that lets you crew as though they were larger power or higher power. So that means that you can just play bigger vehicles and spend less resource to really crew these vehicles up. I definitely think it's possible. You're getting quite a bit of support from for vehicles in this set, and I think that there will be a thought at testing a vehicles deck in Standard, possibly even in formats like Historic, maybe, where we have access to more vehicles from sets like Kaladesh. And so pretty cool that this kind of what seemed to be a forgotten archetype is getting some love and support, and possibly could be pretty good. Lastly here, in the multicolor stuff, Ryu Storm's Edge, legendary creature, human samurai, 4 mana for 3/3, first strike. Whenever Samurai or Warrior you control attacks alone, you get to untap it, so that's nice. And then if it's the first combat phase of the turn, there's an additional combat phase after this phase. So actually really, really cool, really cool effect on this card. Usually extra combat steps are really powerful in Magic, and so having one kind of staple to a commander, but you also, I guess you don't have to play Samurai. You could play Warriors off of this, but there are some very powerful things you can do with, even one extra combat step. So very cool card. You have the normal, extended, and the Samurai Showcase frame. artwork here. Very, very cool. There are no new lands that came out over the weekend, but I'm sure there, aside from just kind of the extended art versions of Sokens and Crucible of Defiance, which we saw here, and Boseiju, who endures. So nothing crazy there, but that's a lot of cool new cards, and there are even more coming out today. Today's Monday, and there's already a bunch of awesome, crazy cool cards. So be sure to stay tuned to the channel. Check out mtgrocks.com. We're going to have all the cards uploaded in the preview gallery. And then again, tomorrow we will have the recap for today's spoilers go up on the YouTube channel. So definitely make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Drop a like if you like the new cards. Let me know in the comments below, what are your favorite previews from today? What are you most excited about to play with? And again, like I said, check out mtgrocks.com for all the spoilers, the preview gallery, all the content we got going on over there. Thank you guys so much for watching. We will see you guys in the next video.